Hi, my name is Carol Lakay. I am from Cluttersville and I've been living here for a little bit short of a couple of months or 50 years. We as the Daniels family moved to Cluttersville when I was around 13, 14 years old from Iders Valley. I was born in the Stellenbosch hospital. My mother is Elizabeth Daniels and my father David Daniels. My father's family is very well known in Stellenbosch, but my mom is coming from Worcester area. But they met here in Stellenbosch. My mom was around 17 years old when she had me. I was born in Stellenbosch Hospital and we were living around Jamestown farming area. I went to primary school at Weber Gedenk School in Jamestown, and I went 1 year late because we lived under the mountain. For those who are familiar with Stellenbosch, it's a mountainous area. We lived under the mountains, and it was far to walk for a little one that's just about 6 years old. So she kept me 1 year late at home because she said I was too small. I was too tiny to be walking alone to school because we had to cross a river. And so I went to school 1 year late, and I had to walk with another two boys, some of my mom's friends that lived down the road in Stellenbosch Road in Jamestown. So when I was almost 7 years old, 6 years, turning 7 in March, I went to school at Weber Gedenk in around 1969. My second year was 1970, and then we moved to Iders Valley. My schooling in Iders Valley was at Iders Valley Primary School, and that was between 1970 to 71 to 75. And in 75, we actually moved to Cluttersville. We lived in an area in Iders Valley that was called a noodkamp. In the 70s, Stellenbosch had a housing problem, as we still have today. But that time, there was an old clinic in Iders Valley where they would put the people that didn't have a house. The whole area was people that didn't have a place to live. There was an old sports field and they didn't use it anymore, so the people were put there temporarily until, that's why it was called a noodkamp. And we lived there peacefully, but the area that my family lived on was on top of an old clinic. Clinic wasn't used anymore. The offices, there was about 5 offices, and there was people living in there, families living in there. But our family and my mother's sister's family, the September family, lived on a stoep area. It was open and we put our bungalows there. So then, when my sister was born in 1974, my niece was also born at the same time. Now, the one was born in July and the other one in October, and that was now 50 years back today. My niece got ill. She got meningitis, which was picked up on the clinic, from the clinic. So all the families got a house or a smallish house or an apartment, a flat in Cluttersville. We were all moved to Cluttersville. Around about 7 to 8 families were moved to Cluttersville. And at that time I was 14 years old and I cried. I remember I was very upset that I had to move to Cluttersville because in those days already there was already riots and things going on in Cluttersville because people were unhappy, ratepayers were unhappy, people were unhappy because they had to move from town. I never lived there in town. The area that they called, I don't recall the area now, it's just going now. But everybody was moved at that stage. So people were unhappy with the rates that they were paying, and I remember seeing in the newspapers that people were fighting in Cluttersville, and now we were moving to Cluttersville, and this was in 1975. So eventually, we were all taken to Ida's Valley. The only schools were in Ida's Valley. There was only one primary school, and they used to call it Cluttersville, the Groen School, Cluttersville Primary School. There was no high school, only that one primary school, and I was already at the end of the primary school. And when we moved here, we were 7. I was the eldest of the 7. The other siblings moved. They all went to Cluttersville Primary School. And then eventually in 1979, in 75, when we moved to Cluttersville, I lived in flat F, number 2. Funnily, these same flats were only getting some omheining, like black omheinings that they've put around it now. I mean, it's more than 50 years later. I'm still in Cluttersville, and when we moved there, those flats were already about 5 to 10 years old. They were already existing around about that time. So we lived there in peace. We grew up. I got to love Cluttersville. I made new friends. And when I went to high school, I was very privileged to have gone to high school in 1976, because those time there was only Lukhof High School, and all Cluttersville kids had to go to the high school. So they had to be accommodated. So the school was full. So only 10 of Ida's Valley Primary and 10 of Broekner Primary could go to Lukhof. So I was privileged, because I was only the kids that were first and second in their classes. Only the standard 5 classes at that time, at that stage. 2 of each class could go to Lukhof, and I was privileged to be one of the 10. So I think I must have been first or second in my class. My memory is not so good anymore, but I think I was first in my class, and I could go to Lukhof. So we were a privileged group that landed in the 6A class in 1976 at Lukhof High School. Some of the other kids from Cluttersville had to be accommodated at Broekner Primary School, and the other schools, like in Pineal and Peniel at that stage, they had to also have some standard 6s at their school. So it was a time of shortages. There weren't enough homes, there weren't enough schools. Lukhof was busting over, it seems. There was, believe me or not, there were 14 buses going out of Cluttersville every morning to Lukhof. And of course, my friends and I, we took the last bus. We always took the last bus out of Cluttersville, because it was fun for us to get together, sitting at the back of the bus and just going to school. So Lukhof, in my first year of Lukhof, was the riots, the 1976 riots. And why am I telling you all of this? Because I think the way I grew up has got a lot of the impact of what and who I am today. So going back to my high school years, it was very carefree. I had my group of friends, and we had fun. We were really a great group. I can even recall now, up till today, 50 years, almost 50 years later, we are still friends. Most of us are still friends. One of my friends must have been interviewed in Ida's Valley today. She was a teacher at Lukhof, Shireen Barnes. So she must have also told the story about her escapades in Ida's Valley School, because she became a teacher. Almost all of my friends became teachers, but it was never my intention to become a teacher. I wanted to become a nurse, but my life never turned out to become a nurse. I could never become a nurse because I had to go work. My father was a carpenter. He was one of the highest paid carpenters in the Western Cape. He was highly intelligent. He was very well trained in maths. And just recently I found out that there was a teacher at Lukov, the old Lukov school in town, Walter Perry. He was a mathematician and he was very clever. So just recently I heard that I always heard from my father about Mr. Perry and Mr. Perry, but I've never had the opportunity to know about him until earlier this year, when the Lukov alumni group actually honored him. And then it was, for me, it was like getting to know a person that I've always heard of spoken in the house. My father used to always talk about him when my father went to school. So the old Lukov school, today there's a lot of things that people can say about the school. People are still fighting for the school. The school will be 90 years old next year, and the alumni are now busy having some functions where they honor some of the teachers, some of the principals. They're just getting everything rolling out now for next year. So how did I get to what I am today? I am the founder of Stellenbosch magazine, and that also came by chance. I've never known anything about writing. I've never attended journalism school. I don't know anything about. I've never been formally trained. Once I attended a workshop that was organized by the Stellenbosch group here in Stellenbosch, and I was a part of the volunteers, the Stellenbosch volunteers, and I could attend, and we organized a workshop at the journalism department, and that was my one and only time stepping into the university, doing anything that had to do with writing. But by then I was already doing my magazine. So since high school, I've always read a lot of magazines, and my mom belonged to a club, a book club, and I've always read the Rooirose. I grew up on the Rooirose and the Rapport. Sundays we didn't go without the Rapport. So the Rapport was one of the newspapers that we've always read. And then of course the magazines, the Rooirose, Sari, and stories like that. So reading was my passion. And what helped me was also that my mom belonged to this Leserskring book club, and every month the books would arrive, and I couldn't wait for it to arrive so that I could just get into the books. And up till today, my mom is like 80 years old and she's still reading. There's no more, I don't think the Leserskring book club exists anymore, but my mom reads books like this. And she's not a very well-educated person. She had to leave school at standard 4, but she loves reading, and reading takes her out of her zone where she's in today. So I started the magazine by chance, as I said. What happened is I was over 50, and I was already a grandmother, and I've changed my life around somewhere in the 40s, and I decided, no, I don't want to be in a secular world anymore. I want to do something different. So somehow what I wanted to do didn't realize, and so I thought, what can I do? I'm over 50 years old, nobody's going to employ me. So at that stage I lived with my children in Gordons Bay, and at one of the shops I saw a pamphlet with little advertising. And I thought, I can do this, but maybe not in Gordons Bay because I'm not from that area and I don't know the area. But in Stellenbosch, it can work because I know everybody. So what I've done is I've come back to Cluttersville in around about 2012, 2013. I was just in Gordon Bay for less than a year or two, less than 2 years, yes. I was just like assisting my daughter who was working overseas at that stage, and I looked after a boy. He was around 2-3 years old at that stage. So when she came back, I also came back to Stellenbosch, and I started this entrepreneurship thing. And I saw, well, this is working, but there's actually something else that I would rather do more than selling advertising space. And the idea about a magazine for Stellenbosch came around because at that stage, the local newspaper weren't so effective in telling the people's stories. And I wanted to see and hear our people's stories. So I started and I thought through everything. And in my mind, I gathered who I would have working with me as a team. And my first idea was my English teacher from Lukov. She came from England around about 1978. She was just there to stand in for another teacher that was on maternity leave. But since 1978, the class kept in contact with her. Her husband also owned a architect shop in Stellenbosch, and we used to visit them. They became Dick and Carol Crane to us. So the teacher that came from England that didn't understand this apartheid system came to Lukov to teach for a while, and she made friends for life because all of us still visits Miss Crane. During COVID, she moved to, they sold the business and they moved to England. They were never going to go back to England because they were here set for life until COVID came. And they lost everything because the architect firm had to close down. She was retired by then. Her husband Dick was also near retirement age, and they made the decision to go to England, back to England. So they left. So if it wasn't for her being being there for me as the first editor of Stellenbosch magazine, I wouldn't have started it because everything depended on her saying yes or no. So she said yes. I met her at the cake shop, Mila's cake shop in Cluttersville, in town, and this was the thing that I asked her, and she agreed. And that same night, that was on 5 December 2013, and that same night Mandela died. He passed away. So to me it was a very historical moment, and on February the 7th, 2014, we launched the magazine. So we launched very small with about 20 copies, was all I could afford at that stage, because it was not something that went big. It was my baby. I was a volunteer still at I was a volunteer at Stellenbosch Heritage Project at that time, and the magazine was like, it wasn't big thing, it wasn't commercialized, it was my baby that grew with me. So it grew and people got to know about me. But I want to actually tell you the story about how I found out that my sister could write. When I was doing the very first issue of Stellenbosch magazine, I said there's one thing missing, and the one thing that was missing was a poem about Stellenbosch. So my sister, who recently just got divorced and moved back, she lived in Cape Town in Strandfontein for 30 years while she was married, and she moved back to my parents' house, and I was already there because I was also like 5 or 6 years divorced at that stage. So my sister went to the room. I was telling her, listen, where can I find a poem about Stellenbosch? And she said, just wait. She went to the room and I thought, what's she going to do in the room? She came back and she gave me a poem about Stellenbosch, and I looked at her and I said, what? Who wrote this? I did, she said. I said, no, it can't be. How can we be sisters for so long? And this is the first time that I see that you write poems. So she's been writing poems for 13 years. And the first time that I found out was when I was looking for a poem about Stellenbosch. So then I said, no, this can't be, show me. And we went to her room, and there she had a stack of poems that she's written. She was writing also for Strandfontein, newspapers, anthropologies, and stuff like that. She was actually sending them in also to newspapers, Strandfontein News or whatever. I don't know which one is on that side. So I realized, but my sister is sitting here with poems that she can publish. So she said, no, but how are we going to publish it? It was, poems were written everywhere, and mostly about the hurt that she and women and abused people went through. So yeah, she actually didn't want to publish it because she didn't want everybody to know about the hurts that she went through all these years, how she got along, and how she wrote everything down. And she told me that she had to write it down for her to stay sane. And to stay sane. And then afterwards, when I told her, but let's put this in a book form, she was still not very happy with it. But then afterwards, she thought, maybe this can help somebody else. So she added more poems about other people's and other types of abuse. And so the story that turns out was Women Unite. So we published the book, the first one. We got the Eikestad News there in the Breugel. We had a launch, and eventually both of us had to learn how to publish a book. And I took it on me to publish the first book for my sister. It was one hell of an experience. We didn't know a single thing about publishing. Not a single thing. We had no publishing program. And then one of my printers told me, you know, Carol, why don't you just design the stuff yourself instead of asking people? Because there's a simple program, they call it Publisher, you can design on there. So I taught myself how to use that program, and eventually I got it right, and we published the first book in the Breugel Theatre. We got sponsors, Vivian Kleinans from Seven Sisters Wine Farm. She sponsored us wine. At that stage, they are Seven Sisters, and they had the names on the bottles of wine. So one of the wines were named Carol also. The Carol was a red wine. So it was all red wines. So her Seven Sisters' names were on these bottles of wine. So she actually donated 42 bottles of wine for us. So if we had nothing, we had wine. And we invited the community of Stellenbosch, and we had a launch for Women Unite in the Breugel Theatre. And the reporter at that stage, he did a write-up for her, and all of a sudden now she was known. She wrote under the name Audrey Francis because she didn't want to let everybody know her real name. She wasn't aware, she wasn't ready for that yet. After that, in 2017, she wrote I Am a South African. Remember, these were all poems that she had. We just put it together. So the second one we put together was in 2016 to be published in 2017. And this was put together by the students of the design school Barbara Foss's design school in Techno Park, and they actually did some drawings also for her and designed a beautiful book with a leather cover that she could sell. That was book number 2. Now, book number 3 was Afrikaans. So she tried her hand at Afrikaans. Although we grew up in Cluttersville, in Afrikaans schools, we changed our language to English. Because she grew up in, she married somebody that was English spoken in Strandfontein, and her children grew up English and everything. But she wanted to write in this beautiful Afrikaans language. And she decided on this very controversial name, Flenters. Not with a F, but with a V. We were fighting about this name, but she insisted she want Flenters with a V and not with a F. So she wrote Flenters about the Afrikaans. Beautiful. She's very much in love with writing in Afrikaans too, because she loves Afrikaans. And then the next one, it just came the one after the other after the other. The next one was My Journey Home, a Christian book about how she's found her way back after being a rebellious teenager, how writing saved her, and how she found her way back to God. So that is the 4th book, I think. And now she's done an animal book, Cross the Oceans. She's writing about animals and humans, the relationship between animals and humans across the continents, because her daughter lives in Mastic, Long Island, and she visits them every year or every second year for about 4 or 5 months. So for the past 10 years she's been doing that. So she wrote about the animals that lived with them, with her daughters, both her daughters, and our domestic animals, and the animals that grew up with the kids. So that was the animals. Now she's doing America, because she's been up and down to America for so many times now. So she's writing America now. She must just put it together. And the final one is Clara's stories. These stories she's written, it's very humorous. Short stories about everyday life and things that's happening in the household and on the taxi and the bus, wherever she's traveling, on the plane, on the train, wherever she's traveling, she's picking up little stories and she's putting it in words. And so she's writing Clara's stories in Afrikaans again, but it's short stories, not poetry. So these are the 2 she's busy with now. The American poetry, and the one about Clara. So I'm fascinated that because of the fact that I was looking for one poem about Stellenbosch, the reaction about that made my sister write. So to me, that is, some of the books are here in the library. I think they bought some of her books, 1 or 2 of her books. I think I'm a South African and Women Unite, maybe. And there are 1 or 2 in the Iders Valley Library and also in the town library. But it is a dream that all her books should be in all the libraries in Stellenbosch and in Cape Town, especially Strandfontein, where she grew up, where her kids grew up and where people got to know her. Funnily, one of her classmates in Iders Valley was the librarian in, I'm not sure if it's Cape Town or in Strandfontein, and they got together, and I think they're working on a deal that she can now start giving her books to the libraries. My magazine, I'm writing the stories about the people of Stellenbosch, giving them a voice. And in 2021 with COVID, we stopped everything. Like everything else, life just came to a halt. So my last magazine is also still online. If people want to see it, I always send them the link, or read it. I always send them the link, and I tell them that was the last. So last year, I was wondering, should I continue? But now I've had very little time, because now I'm not only anymore a volunteer at EBOS. I became the EBOS Heritage Project. I became the project manager. And EBOS Heritage Project is in Stellenbosch now for 13 years, and it works in the 14 dorpies, where Cluttersville is one of them, and it bridged the gap between the old and the new. So like the apartheid, the heritage that was there during apartheid, we're trying to build a new heritage in Stellenbosch. So I'm connected very well within Stellenbosch. And I can get stories very easily. But currently, last year, I told my boss, you know what, I think I'm done with you now. Your dream is, I'm living your dream. You are building your business, and I'm building your dream. So he understood. And since last year, I've been getting back into the business of bringing the magazine back. So I've now got a team and a new editor, and a team that wants to see this magazine succeed again. So we're working on releasing the new magazine. We've changed the name a little bit from Stellenbosch Magazine to the Stellenbosch Magazine. We've changed the way it looks. We've added more pages for a business directory where you can advertise your business in, or just list your business or your organization, and spreading the news through all the 14 dorpies and Stellenbosch town. So we are in the process of launching it, and we are just waiting on a date. It would have been on the 31st of August, but the venue is not available that day, so we're waiting for the next week. So to relaunch the Stellenbosch magazine, we have already got a lot of stories. We've got everything ready except for the venue. So we're looking forward in relaunching the Stellenbosch magazine and telling the people stories again, because people have been, wherever they see me, they will always tell me, when is the magazine coming back? When is it coming back? When can we read the stories again? Because it's a treasured product. People don't just give it away once they've bought it. You see, they keep it. Like one of the girls that I've approached to be on my team, she came to the first meeting with her magazine that she bought in 2016, and she was the only one that read it. It was still new. She was the only person that went through it. And I said, oh, wow, look how beautiful this magazine is. It's 2016's issue, and it still looks like this. And she said, yes, it's going everywhere with me. Wherever I move, it's going with me, because she wrote some of the articles in it at that stage. So she's so proud of the magazine that she shows everybody. So that is what Stellenbosch magazine is. It's a product of the community, for the community, through the community, for the community, by the community. Because I'm a girl, a woman of the soil. Next year I would be here 50 years in Cluttersville, and I love telling the stories of Cluttersville. Not only Cluttersville, Stellenbosch, and it's not only just one race, it's all the races. It's everybody's stories. So, yeah, that's my story with the magazine. I don't know what else I can tell you. I'm also with another group, Transform Cluttersville Together. In 2022, I joined the group because the lady that started it held Cluttersville very near to her heart. And she was a teacher here from Cluttersville High School. And when she retired, or she left many years back, but she always said one day she wants to give back to Cluttersville. And we are all of the same mind. We all want to give back to Cluttersville. So we don't understand what's going on now with all this gangsterism and shootings and things like that. So yes, that is the other organization that I'm involved with. But everything is, my job is to tell the stories. So because I was busy with Stellenbosch, I couldn't tell the Cluttersville stories so much. But in 2017, I wrote women's stories, almost 30 of them, for Cluttersville Women Empowerment, another NPO that I was involved with. So I put it on Facebook, and the whole of Cluttersville. At that stage in 2017, people didn't write their stories and stuff like that on Facebook so much as now. Nowadays you can find the stories everywhere. But then it was something new, and I wrote stories about those women and what they went through. And every year we're getting that reminder on Facebook about the stories that was told, and then we just redo it. It is my I want to put those stories in a book form, and publish it and give it to the ladies which stories I wrote. So that is one project that I really want to do once I am done with Stellenbosch in September. So yeah.